This is a video about Turnitin, and my name is Kevin Taylor. Turnitin is a very adaptable utility online that enables faculty to receive, grade, check for plagiarism, and then distribute those graded papers to their students. And I'm a big fan for several reasons. One is it reduces the incoming number of papers and the work that happens with them. It does this because they're not handing you printed copies or emailing it to you, but rather they are submitting it through an online system and library. Blackboard also enables you to easily mark up and comment on students' papers. You can provide inline comments, and you can provide a overall comment. You can grade, you can use a rubric, you can even include a audio comment that the student can listen to later. So Turnitin provides these ways of grading papers, and it also, of course, provides for plagiarism in terms of plagiarism checking. And this is kind of a tentpole feature of Turnitin that many people associate with Turnitin. And although it's certainly true that that's very helpful with the plagiarism checker, because students are very tricky at times with their writing. They may be pulling from discussion groups. They may be copying from various websites, and I don't think anyone can completely guarantee that someone's not using other resources. It could be another student, so it looks and sounds like college writing. It could be an old paper you've graded. I have seen that before, where paper from 3 years ago comes back in because someone has a friend who has helped them with it. So these are possibilities that happen with plagiarism, and Turnitin is helping you by checking for that. Turnitin is also allowing you to distribute the papers that you have graded, because students simply sign in to Blackboard or whatever their system is, and they go into their assignments and they can see your comments. So you're not having to email back the students their papers with track changes in Microsoft Word. You're not having to email back grades or something, which at my institution's actually discouraged. So you are able to simply receive the papers online, comment on them, and then it goes back to the students digitally. They don't have to print anything out. You don't have to try to hand them out to students and then they're not there. You don't have to email it to them and then they say, I lost my ability to access my email. So Turnitin provides a solution to these four problems of collecting and grading and checking for plagiarism, and then distributing the graded papers back to the students. The way you do this is I would put these under assignments. If you go into assignments here, assessments, you'll notice Turnitin assignment is separate from the other normal assignments. It's not a content, but it is down here in a Turnitin assignment. Here you can add the Turnitin assignment. You have three options. You can do a paper assignment, which is just your basic paper that you can assign for students to complete. There is a peer mark assignment. Once you've created a paper assignment, then you can have the students actually evaluate each other's work, and of course their grade is not the final grade for the paper, but they do receive a grade for evaluating each other's work. You can create a rubric for it. You do need an original paper assignment for it. The peer mark assignment system is a useful pedagogical tool. It is a little finicky sometimes when students are late with their papers. It doesn't respond well to any changes. You can't really edit the peer mark assignment, and it doesn't tolerate late papers. So watch out for that, but it is a useful tool there to have a peer mark assignment, and I've used that in numerous classes. And then revision assignment is if you want the students to draft their work, and so they might write a paper in stages. You might have a 1,500 word page paper, and then you would have a 2,200 word page paper. or 2200 word paper, and they would write that in the stages, so it includes the prior work and you can respond to that prior work, and then the new paper would incorporate that and it wouldn't consider that plagiarism because it's building on their prior work. And so that is a useful pedagogical step as well. So paper assignment, next step. Here I can give it a title, the start date, the due date, the post date, the value. And down here, optional settings, I can give comments and instructions. Here's where I can enter a start date when the students will be able to actually see the assignment. I usually do 2 weeks before the due date. Here I can have a due date, and here's a post date, and this is when the grade and the comments get posted to so the students can see it, so it's available to Blackboard. I don't worry too much about this. You could set it, say, if it's going to take you 2 weeks to grade the papers, you could set it 2 weeks later, and that way some students aren't saying, hey, where's my paper, because so-and-so got theirs graded and I haven't gotten mine yet. So if it's due on the 21st, you could come down here and make it post on April 4th, and that gives you a little cushion there. Down here under your various options, again, you could enter special instructions. This is where I would put 1500 words. Turnitin can count words, which is useful because that's more professional than a page number. Word limit is better. So 1500 words. Please use the book. Something like that. You can have special instructions. I normally allow submissions after the due date. That's useful because people can turn it in late and you can deduct points, whatever your policy is, but they're still able to submit late versus getting a 0 for the test. Somehow you could generate originality reports for submissions or not. I guess if you just wanted to grade but not check for plagiarism, you could do that. I've never actually used that. I've never turned that off, but that is there. You can have it exclude the bibliographic material, so it will try to recognize footnotes or the bibliography at the end and not count that as plagiarism. Here you can exclude quoted material, so presumably it's looking for quotation marks, and we'll ignore that because obviously that is plagiarism because you are copying, but it's a plagiarism that is ethical because you're quoting and giving credit where it came from. This is interesting here. Allow students to see originality reports. Here you could let the student actually see the report after they've submitted it, and that might be useful in terms of a teaching tool because the students can actually see their bad habits, see how for some students they might have been taught that you write by getting a pastiche of various things in a Word document and then you kind of rewrite it, and they don't realize how those little bits creep into the paper. So you might actually allow them to see the originality report, or the default is to not let them see the report, and that is just for your eyes only. Here's where about submitting your papers. Here's where you can attach a rubric, and for Pfeiffer University and for our general education rubrics, I did have to recreate the rubric. You can't import or just copy and paste, but once you've put it in there, you can always use it for all your courses and all your assignments, so it's in the library for you. So it took me probably 15 minutes to create this and Turnitin, and then you do have to download it and send in the report separately. It's not as easily accessible in Blackboard, but I do think that those few kind of painful steps are worth the overall yield here in terms of your how useful Turnitin is. But do realize there is a rubric, but it is a bit, you can use a rubric, but you're going to have to create it, and it's a bit outside of the norm in terms of how Blackboard or other systems might work. So that's how you would set it up, and you could hit submit, and the assignment has been added. And I can go in here. It's a little odd from this assignment page. If you go in, it thinks you're trying to submit as a student. So this can be a little frustrating. You'll see it thinks you're trying to submit things. So this is kind of what a student would see. Here's where you could go in and submit a paper for a student. I don't like to tell students I can do that because that defeats the whole point of having them do it for me. I mean, it's their paper, but in a certain scenarios you could submit the paper yourself, or you could actually submit a paper from another class. Say something's got you suspicious, or someone sent a letter or something and you just want to check, you could just put it into a class and throw it up there and just see what Turnitin says about it, because Turnitin isn't checking in terms of classes or material. It's simply just looking for comparison points within its library of what it considers to be plagiarism. Here you can actually upload directly from some cloud services, which is useful especially if a student or someone is working from a mobile device, or say a Chromebook or something where you're not always able to access a desktop. Here, if you've worked on it and put it in Dropbox or Google Drive, you can kind of link and upload it immediately from there. One of the things to note when submitting a paper, either if you do it or your students are doing it, is that there's a couple of steps. If we just fill in some fake information here and I choose from the computer, note I'll click upload and it's uploading it, but there's still a confirm page, and a lot of students will see this and they'll actually see a sample of their paper and then they run off to Starbucks. They just kind of disappear, and the paper is not really submitted right now. What this is doing is saying, is this the paper you mean to submit? And if it is, then you hit confirm. One thing you can always tell a student is, did you get a confirmation code? Because when you hit confirm here, it will give you a confirmation code on the screen and it will email it to the student. And if they didn't get the confirmation code, 98% chance they did not do this final step of clicking confirm. So it's not enough to upload, they must confirm and get the actual code. So that's one thing to watch for. Here is what a paper would look like. You can go in here and click, and it brings up a paper. Here's a sample paper, an actual paper, and I've taken out the student's name. But I can make comments here. I could say, good word usage. I can use a quick mark, which are little saved comments. Here's a, we'll just say there's a comma splice there. I can type something. I don't really ever use that, but you could actually type something above something like that. So you can make little comments in line within the paper. And then over here, you can provide an overall comment. So, great work, good flow, please quote the book more. And you can do some links and underlining and things. Here's where you can actually do a voice comment, which is pretty neat. And if you get carpal tunnel syndrome, or you don't type as fast as you talk, which most people probably do, speak more quickly than they type, you can click an audio comment, you can pause it, you get 3 minutes, and then if you like it, you can click upload and the students can listen to that. This also works on the iPad app, so it's actually pretty nifty. If you're in a good quiet space and you get in the habit of it, you can leave the students' voice comments. I did not give an amount of points when I set this up, but if I had and had typed 100, the normal amount, here's where I could grade the paper, give it a grade. So there's that, and here's a rubric, and you could score it whatever rubric you've done, and then you can use the rubric to actually apply to the grade, or you can grade it separately from the rubric. Either way works. So that is the way of making comments on a paper. So how do you actually see the plagiarism report? Here is a student's paper, and you can see on the right here, what we're interested in for plagiarism is this red area that shows matches. You'll recall that the blue area here is for the grading, so this is the rubric and the comments and the quick marks, little saved comments on that you can reuse for papers. The red area is for the plagiarism. This paper has a score of 7, which is a very low score. I'm only really concerned about a score that's higher than 20 or so. So anything getting above 20, I'm usually going to look and try to see what sorts of plagiarism are going on within the paper. If I click on this here, it breaks this out for me. I can actually turn off my comments, turn that on and off there. But I can come down here and I can see that this hit here is for a quote from the book of Esther in the Old Testament. And that's got quotation marks, so that's obviously not plagiarism. I'm not concerned with that. If there were hits that were concerning, I can go in here and I can see where Turnitin thinks it's being pulled from. So there's a website that uses that same citation. Of course, that doesn't mean that that's where the student got it from, but there is a hit that Turnitin is suggesting. Here is a different hit that it has found, and if I had turned on the exclude bibliography, presumably Turnitin would not have highlighted this, but within the paper it is picking up that this book here is this title is plagiarized, but obviously it's bibliography. I'm not worried about it. So for a paper of this length, a 7 is a perfectly decent score. 7% of the paper it says is plagiarized, but actually now that I've checked, none of it is plagiarized, so I am not concerned. Now this percentage will shift depending on how long the paper is. If you do a very short paper, 2 to 3 pages, the student has a lot of quotations in the paper, they may have a score of 30–40% in terms of what Turnitin gives it. But if it's all properly cited, of course, that's not plagiarism. So sometimes the scores are misleading, so I usually check anything that's getting over 15 to 20. I want to just take a look at, but as you can see, that's a very brief consideration, and I can simply then turn that off and go back into my grading if I so desire, and so I can check it and then check out. Here is some information I can get about the paper, when it was submitted, the date and time stamp, the word count. These things are useful. Down here is where you would generate the code if you want to link it to the iPad app, because otherwise the iPad app doesn't know who you are, your institution, your classes. So that's how Turnitin would find you over the iPad and get the papers to you. Here's where you can download various views. You can see the current view, you can see the original paper, you can see a digital receipt. So if you wanted to download a plagiarism report, you could turn off your comments, turn on the plagiarism, come over here and click current view. That would generate a PDF that would give you the report, the number, where these citations it thinks are coming from. So if you needed to confront a student or report a student, that's how you would do that. Here is a sample paper from prior year that showed a lot of plagiarism. Now normally this would be in color, but for some reason it ended up being black and white here. I'm getting a 25% similarity index, and it will indicate where it's seeing some similarities, and it'll actually highlight those. It'll show where things are coming from in terms of where it sees the hits. So the nice thing is you can actually evaluate that. Here the student may have been trying to trick the system because there are words that don't line up exactly, or the student may have actually been taught this is the way you write, where you take something and you kind of cut and paste and then you alter it, and that is writing. And so that's where your own expertise and critique and experience will have to come in making sense of that paper. Here's one that actually 43% with color coding, and you can see here how this whole page is coming from, it says one site. Now one trick is you don't know if that's the exact site the student is pulling from. Internet is, copies of copies of copies, and so they could have pulled from somewhere else, but at least Turnitin thinks, oh, this is where the source code comes from. That's what Turnitin is pointing to. They could have pulled it from somewhere else. Sometimes you might ask them, did you go to Yahoo groups? And the student may say no. The real question is, did they plagiarize from somewhere? And here you can see other students pulling from the same source. Now, it could be they're pulling from the book itself and they're rewriting bits of the book or quoting the book. So you will have to look and decide what you think is going on in a paper. But that is how a Turnitin report would look and how it functions. The benefits with Turnitin is that it is tied to the student. So if they have connected it to their name, presumably, you don't have to worry about the paper not having a name on it. So if this had been handed to me and maybe I lost the cover page or it wasn't stapled, see this page doesn't have a page number on it, nor does it have a student name or assignment. But of course, in Turnitin, it doesn't really matter because Turnitin is going to see it in the order, it's going to connect it to the student and the assignment. So that's not a concern for me. It's also connected with the word count. You can see here I have the word count is 1,500 words. So if this was a 1,500 word assignment, they've met that. Character count, I just ignore. Submission ID doesn't matter. The time submitted is great because you can see that whether they actually, how late the paper was or at what time they were working on it when they submitted it. If the student says, I couldn't get it to go through, you can go and see what time they were trying to work on that. Turnitin is keeping this separate from your email. You can't lose it. You don't have to worry about returning it. It's all there in the cloud, and it does give them a confirmation code. It does have a great iPad app that you can work offline. You would download the app for free, and then you generate a code from Turnitin from your computer and enter that into the iPad app, and that then synchronizes, it enables the app to know who you are, and it will sync those papers. You can download them, and then you can turn off Wi-Fi. You can get on a plane and you can grade offline when you don't have internet somewhere. Maybe you're hiking, and of course you would want to grade your papers on a beautiful hike in the Grand Canyon. And so you can download them, you can grade them, and then when you get back to internet and Wi-Fi, you can then sync it back up, and all of a sudden all those comments, all those grades, all that rubric scoring gets slurped back into Turnitin and Blackboard, and it is there for your students and for you. So again, this is about Turnitin and how I use it and why I'm a big fan of it. It does save me a significant amount of time and headache in terms of not having to worry about students getting me the paper, or that the printer was out of paper, or that they didn't have a stapler, or they forgot to put their name on it, or they handed it to me late and I've got to write on it, mark on it what time they gave me, that it was late. I've got to carry around typed written papers, printed out papers that I have to make sure I don't lose, or I may find myself somewhere where I wish I had the papers I could grade. Now all of a sudden, as long as you have internet and a computer or laptop, you can do your work and you can grade. And it also avoids the problem of having a lot of emails and having to save attachments somewhere, rename them, add comments, and then get it back to students. All these problems are solved. So happy grading, and let me know if I can be of any help.